appendix over here. But the reason I think that the appendices are important is because even if you're not involved specifically in, can I pull this off? Yep, there it is. Just too happy when that happens. So here's page 161. We go through I'm certainly not going to read these, but I want to educate you because this is very important on background if you're involved in any kind of sex trafficking. The Palermo Protocol was adopted as international law, finally making global sex trafficking illegal. It really wasn't illegal until then. And so in Palermo, Italy, people met, and so that's what take these off, I can't read them. The Palermo Protocol made it illegal in international law to transport people, to sell people for sex, and to transport them to sell them for sex. And so here we have them for sex. And so here we have, I'm just going to go quickly through that. Here we have like the definitions. Oh, that's it. I've closed this. Here we have the definitions. There's many legal definitions. And so here we go. So this is international law, which the United States and Nigeria both hold to. And then this is the United States version of it in the year 2000, the Victims of Trafficking and Violence Protection Act, the year 2000. So when I said that the study started, this field in psychological literature started only in 1999, then just 1 year later, the international law caught up. And then I think I was talking to some of our NAPTIP friends and partners, and NAPTIP actually was started back in 2003. And we actually don't have, I'm glad we have NAPTIP in Nigeria, we do not have a federal agency in charge of all the care, prosecution, prevention in America. I wish we did. So, but we don't, America. So that's the law. And then here's the important stuff. Appendix 3. See, I'm a nerd now, a scholar, so I really like this stuff. It really seems kind of boring, maybe, but if you're interested in learning about trafficking, when you get the PDF, these appendices are really important. The Face of Modern Slavery. This is the Department of State, our State Department puts out an annual trafficking in persons report. Here's the Face of Modern Slavery. And then here's what I want to get to and talk to you about. This is small. There are 4 disorders for all of us psychologists and behavioral therapists, 4 disorders as defined by the DSM-5, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental and Nervous Disorders. 5 disorders, and you'll recognize them, 3 especially. It's going to be anxiety, depression, PTSD, and then the one that has less recognized, but just as important, and that is cognitive impairment. So we're going to take our time to go through these, and I won't read the whole thing, but I want to highlight these symptoms. If you work with anybody with anxiety, you'll recognize these. So let's look at these right here and think about anybody you may be counseling, in particular people that have severe trauma. And these are the 6: restlessness, easily fatigued, difficulty concentrating, irritability, muscle tension, sleep disturbance. These are the 6 primary. We won't talk about a diagram, how many of those you have to have. You know, the important thing, if you work with trauma survivors, if they have anxiety, they may have, if they have anxiety, they will have these. But most importantly, I want you to think about traumatized populations you work with. It could be refugees, it could be anybody, street kids, homeless people, people that have been through war, people who have been through terrorism survivors. Anybody with anxiety is going to have these 6. So think about these. These are all pretty straightforward. I'm not going to spend much time on those because these are pretty straightforward, and it gets more and more kind of confusing as we go. Now we get into the second one. It's called major depressive disorder. And look at these 9. If you're a counselor, you know about these 9. These are the 9 criteria, the 9 symptoms that people with depression have. And you have to have 5 of them. So briefly, I'll read them all. depressed mood most of the day, nearly every day, a decreased interest in things you actually do like, significant weight loss, weight gain, insomnia, can't sleep, hypersomnia, the only thing you want to do is sleep, and then psychomotor agitation or retardation, nearly every day. That one's a little less understandable. That just means that you're psychologically agitated, and or you're like keyed up. You're agitated, you can't sit still, can't sit still. Psychomotor retardation means you just like sit in a chair or you stare at the wall. Your body doesn't move, your mind doesn't move, and you're you're fried. That's a sign of depression. And then fatigue or loss of energy nearly every day. And a very important one, this one's, they're all subjective, but this one comes up a lot with everybody, especially trauma survivors of sex trafficking, feelings of worthlessness or excessive or inappropriate guilt. That's very important. Feeling guilty about things that you're not even guilty of. And so what we do with sex trafficking survivors who've been through horrible things, they just don't feel, you might think, oh, they feel horrible. Yes, they feel violated, abused, yes. But sadly, they actually feel guilty. Actually feel like they did it, that it's like their fault. Oftentimes, trafficking survivors have come from not just kind of not so good homes, sometimes they've come from horrible home situations. And that's one thing that put them at risk for being sex trafficked. So they might have been in a bad home and for 12 years, and then they were sex trafficked for 4 years. So sadly, the 4 years of sex trafficking and being raped thousands of times in 4 years, that actually falsely confirmed the lies that they thought about themselves, that they weren't important, that nobody loved them, that nobody cared about them, and they were just worthless, and they're scum. They thought that already 0 to 12, and then they were sex trafficked. So this stuff is wound very tight, it's layered very deep, and that's why we need more people that are trained on how to help survivors. And you have to commit to being with them and really work with them for years, because this is extremely difficult stuff. There's no quickly getting over any trauma, but especially no quick way to get over years of sex trafficking trauma. And then diminished ability, this one comes up again, to think or to concentrate, or indecisiveness. Remember that? And then recurrent thoughts of death, not just fears of dying. So you can imagine with depression in general and a sex trafficking survivor, those of us that work with them, friends, relationships, and mentoring, discipleship, that there's lots of thoughts of death, lots of thoughts about suicide. They just feel so worthless. And then, that's true anyway, and then what makes it worse, they start counseling with a crazy person like me. So I counsel about 55 survivors now. I'm currently counseling about 20, about 12 in Austin live, and about 8 around the world on Skype. And you might think as well, if you don't know much about me, like why in the world would a girl or a woman who's been horribly raped by men, thousands of times, you can't even say hundreds because that would be a month or two, how in the world would a girl or a woman want to talk to me, especially anybody around the world, like crazy middle-aged white man from America, like me. But I'll come to that in our second half when I talk about what people need. People need you to be real. They need you to be genuine. They don't need you to try to pretend to be, a professional or something. They need real, and that's why my biggest appeal to you today, which we'll come to in the second half, is to work on your own trauma. What are the traumas in your life, your childhood, your adolescence? If you're a professional, you've done all the work, you've gone to school, you're a professional, but the traumas in your life will hold you back, and that's why we have to be brave and continually grow and learn, because their trauma, any trauma you have that's unresolved, will be triggered in counseling sex trafficking survivors, because they will tell you the most horrible things you've ever heard. Not most you've ever heard, you have never heard. I can tell you, counsel 55, currently counseling 20 of them, you have never heard things like this. Torturous, I don't do secondary trauma. I will not tell you any stories. I'll mention adjectives. Vile, evil, abominable, wicked, horrible stuff. That the worst that happens in the world, that's what you get to hear. And so now nobody's going to want to volunteer to be a counselor And say, well, I was going to go talk to Ann about volunteering to be a counselor at the Great Little Lighthouse, but now after Kyle scared me, I'm not going to. It's not for everybody. It's not for every counselor. You know, but if God Almighty gives you vision for it, gives you heart for it, He can prepare you. I can help you, and because I want to multiply myself, I want to replicate myself. And then that's two diagnoses. And let's go on to the third, post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. So that's the third diagnostic criteria found in the research I did. Third most, these are not ranked in order, but I put them in order of kind of how they occur. Anxiety comes first. Remind me to do the anxiety necklace. No, you draw the anxiety necklace. Thank you, Sam. And I'll explain to you about the connection between anxiety and depression after the break diagram for you. And then this is the third one, post-traumatic stress disorder. And so it's different than anxiety, but overlaps. It's different than depression, but overlaps. And so briefly, exposure to a traumatic event, witnessing a traumatic event, learning about a traumatic event that happened to a close family member or friend. And then fourth, experiencing repeated or extreme exposure to adverse details of traumatic events. Like, for example, this is, of course, any accident, rape, murder, horrible things happen to you, but it can even be hearing about it. For example, in America, those of you that are older, you remember in America, we had terrorist attacks in 9/11. And so leave it to America. So for months and months, it was on the news over and over and over again. And we saw, planes hitting buildings and the Twin Towers falling down and the thousands of people that were killed. And some people didn't know they really shouldn't be watching the news. Much as over, it actually increased the post-traumatic stress disorder of millions of Americans because they didn't need to see this over and over and over again. It wasn't good for them. It caused them unnecessarily and prolonged trauma. Not that we don't need to know what's going on in the news. We just don't need to see the Twin Towers fall over and over again, knowing that as that happened, 2,500 people were dying, the building was falling. We just didn't need to see that, but people would do that. We were careful about it in our home. And then and it's proven, the evidence of this is proven when you have, and this is sex trafficking survivors have this, sex trafficking survivors, when they start counseling, things get worse because they've been suppressing this stuff ever since. They may be out of counseling a month, they may be out of counseling a few years, but they've been suppressing thousands of horrible sexual assaults, torture, death, participating in death, witness death, worst possible stuff. I won't say anything worse than that. But they've been stuffing it down, and then they come to counseling with a funny guy, crazy guy like me, and we gradually start working through it. And I'm not making them tell me stories. The stories come up every day. Sex trafficking survivors will have nightmares at night, flashes, daymares during the day, intrusive thoughts in the middle of work, in the middle of school, in the middle of driving. Anything can trigger a memory from sex trafficking, because anything, a chair, I won't say how, can trigger a memory of being sexually assaulted. And so anything can, so we have to be aware of this, and we have to be prepared to help them, because at any time something comes up, and it just doesn't come up, it comes up and then they relive it and have body memories, and the body feels like it's happening to them right now. It's the term body memories. And so then, and there's more about post-traumatic stress, but I think I want to move on to the fourth one, major neurocognitive disorder. And as we say, cognitive disorder, and this is the fourth disorder that I found in the research, as that has been found by all research studies, and there's not a lot of them, but it's been found to be consistently present, and that is simply that sex trafficking survivors, because of the trauma in their life, not, if you will, I want to say the word just, in addition to emotional trauma, psychological trauma, because of so many head injuries, being slammed to the floor, wall, kicked and punched in their head, they've had hundreds of concussions. Have you ever had a concussion, trip and fall down, where you have a concussion, and you hit the car windshield or something? That happens to sex trafficking survivors hundreds of times. So they can have some long-term brain damage that makes it hard for them to actually think. And so that significant decline in cognitive function and substantial impairment in cognitive performance, and then it's simply that they can't think like you know that they could. This is not about having low intelligence. It's not about IQ kind of thing. It's just simply that you see they're very indecisive. They have a hard time concentrating. They have a hard time sometimes finishing the dishes. They have a hard time in school, hard time doing chores around the house. And things that you would think that a young woman would, could, should be able to do, and it's because she might be cleaning her room, and then 2 minutes into it, she's just sitting there staring at the wall. And she's not being lazy. That's why it's important you know about these things. Not being lazy, not being stubborn, but actually her mind is just gone blank. It's either completely blank or she's reliving a horrible memory that just came up. So to know about this stuff, and so that when you work with them, not just in counseling, but you work in a work group at home, you can talk to them about it and have some dialogue that's going to be helpful, because one of the most important things, and this is how I get the help, in spite of me being a man, because I'm not a threatening man, and because I worked on my own trauma, and my own trauma, childhood, adolescence, growing up. I had a great mom and dad, great life now. But I grew up in the Philippines, Pakistan, India, and Singapore. Been to a couple of war zones. I was in India and Pakistan. I was in Vietnam during the war as a 9-year-old boy. And it's like, we think, is that a good idea? It was fine. And but I worked on, but also not just my traumas then, but I work on with brain counseling, my masculinity, my body image issues, my sexuality, so that I'm not a creep. So that when I'm working with these girls and women, they don't get a weird vibe from me. I'm not hitting on them. And the things they tell me do not sexually arouse me, but the things they tell me also do not disgust me. And so they see that I am relaxed. I am, in the parlance, I'm cool. I can sit with them and they can vomit out the most horrible stuff. And I'm not going to freak out. I'm not going to sexually abuse them. I'm not going to run from the room and throw up. None of that. I'm just going to sit with them. And there's one thing I might do. You know what I might do? I might cry. And oftentimes I'm counseling them. I cry before they cry. Because if I'm counseling them, and if I'm counseling them that, especially early on in their trauma recovery, they haven't yet even begun to decompress at all. And so I'm feeling the sadness about what before that they feel the sadness about what they're saying. And that's from the Bible. You know, Romans 12:15, weep with those that weep, rejoice with those that rejoice. So I want to ask Samantha Stokesbury come up. She's a friend of mine, and I've known her for a year. Since meeting her in Cape Town a year ago, she's begun a master's degree in professional counseling at Liberty University in the United States. And she works with STOP. So tell us a little bit about that. And that's a ministry, an outreach prevention work in South Africa, Cape Town, South Africa. And I wanted to ask her in particular, in the context of these 4 disorders, in particular, to talk to you first about her experience, because she volunteers down on Long Street in Cape Town, brothel district, and every Friday night they go out and they meet the women, the treasures that are on the streets still being trafficked. And she's witnessed lots of these things on sidewalks. So I wanted her to explain to you how she sees this, and then we'll continue.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's wonderful to be here with you. Thank you, Kyle, for the introduction. As he mentioned, my name is Samantha, and I currently have been living in Cape Town for the past 4 years. So for the past 3.5 years, I've been working for an NGO called STOP, which stands for Stop Trafficking of People. So at STOP, we focus more on prevention. So we would rather a girl or a boy never be trafficked at all, instead of having to do the restoration process, because of how long, you guys know, it's a long and hard process. So we would rather they never had trauma in the first place, instead of having to heal them and walk them through the healing process. So that's our heart. But I also work with an organization called Straatwerk, which means street work in Afrikaans. And what we do is they focus on restoration. So from their side, we go on to, Kyle said, every Friday, we go out with snacks and water and phone numbers. And when we see a girl, we call them treasures. When we see one of them, a girl in prostitution or a girl who is being trafficked on the street, we just love her. We try and love on her. We talk to her. We ask her how she's doing. We try and find out, how did you get here? What's going on? Where are you from? And I'll tell you guys, most of the girls that I've met in South Africa that are being trafficked or in prostitution are from Nigeria and Zimbabwe. So those are the two biggest foreign countries that we see. There are South African women, but there's a lot of foreign women that have come to South Africa looking for work, looking for opportunity, which is wonderful goals, amazing goals. They want to bring money back home to their families, which is honorable. And then something happens, they get scammed, they get tricked, they can't find work, and they end up on the streets. So we just try and give them hope and show them how they can get out of the industry and that we will walk with them through that process. So that's what we do. So before I dig into this, I just want to ask, how many of you have already counseled or worked with a sex trafficking survivor? You could raise your hand. Okay, this is great, actually. Then I'm really glad all of you guys are here. So I'm gonna just share a little bit about, tied into what Kyle was saying about these 4 disorders. When working with some of the girls on the street, we see this play out in real time. So like as I'm approaching a girl, there's so many different reactions that she'll have. So I'm going up to her and she doesn't know me. She has no idea who I am. I'm this, white American girl on the streets of Cape Town. She has no idea what to expect. And so I'm coming up to her and I want to build a relationship. So I'm being nice. I'm like, hi, my name is Sam. How are you? What are you doing out here? And so I'm just trying to be nice and I'll get looks like disgust, looks like, who are you? Why are you talking to me? I'll get girls, there's been a couple times where I was speaking to a girl, she was from Nigeria, passionate, you guys are so fierce and passionate. And this girl, beautiful girl, was standing there and I wanted to go over and give her some chips and just say hi and get to know her. And as soon as we made eye contact, so she's standing on the street and she's kind of looking, watching the people walk by, and she turns and she sees me come up to her, she goes, and she runs. She sprints across the street. And I'm standing there like it's kind of embarrassing. I feel a little bit, when that first happened, I felt rejected. I felt like, oh man, did I do something wrong? What's wrong with me? And so all those thoughts started to go through my head, and that happens all the time. So depending on their reaction, and some of those things that Kyle mentioned, it could be you're talking to a survivor and maybe she starts screaming at you. She starts cursing at you for no reason. All you did was say, are you hungry? Or how was your day? And she's, no. And she starts screaming. And it's like, whoa. And that could offend you and say, hey, no, that's not okay. And so we get offended and bothered by the way they respond. And sometimes maybe we'll speak to them, as I have with some girls on the street, and they forget what I said after 2 minutes of conversation. So I'll ask her about her kids. I'll say, hey, do you have any children? And she'll say, yes, I have 2 kids, Sally and Joe. And I'll say, wow, that's wonderful. How old are they? What? How old are your kids? What? What kids? Oh my goodness. It's like, okay, well, wonderful to meet you. So there's a lot of weird things that happen like that, and it happens all the time, and it's very normal. So just from the show of hands, not many of you have worked with sex trafficking survivors. So the first may be kind of frustrating. I think that's a good word. It can be kind of frustrating. It can upset you. It can even trigger some of your own trauma, as what Kyle was speaking about, which I just want to say to you guys, and as I'm walking through this process and learning more and more about counseling and sex trafficking survivors, I'm realizing that there's so much I don't know. And every single girl is different, and boys, because boys are also trafficked. But what I'm realizing is that the more that I work on my own trauma, the more that I work on my own triggers, we call them trauma triggers. If I've had abuse in my past and a girl that I'm speaking to tells me about her abuse, and I haven't dealt with mine yet, or I'm still bitter or angry or hurt by something that happened to me as a child, then when she's sharing her heart with me, I may start getting like, like uncomfortable. It may make me angry because I'm thinking about the man who abused me or what I want to do to him because I'm frustrated, I'm mad. And so she'll see that and she'll feel that in me as I'm trying to speak to her. And then my attitude towards her is actually going to cause like a block. Does that make sense? So as I'm trying to love her, if that reaction happens and she starts getting mad and then I start getting mad, we're not going to get anywhere. So the more that I heal through my own stuff, the easier it's going to be for me to love on her no matter what she says. No matter how, as Kyle said, some of the stuff is horrible. So no matter what she or he says, I'm going to be able to look at her and say, I may or may not know what that's like, but I'm going to love on you and we're going to walk through this together and I'm here for you no matter what. And nothing you say is going to make me run. Nothing you say is going to make me hate you, make me be disgusted by you, nothing. But that can only happen when we've dealt with our own things, right? So just another thing I want to say is that as we heal through all of our own stuff, and as we start to recognize that the way the girls and the survivors respond isn't about us, because I think sometimes when we counsel, we take things personally. We can take things personally. Whereas it has nothing, when she curses at you, it has nothing to do with you. Praise the Lord. That's amazing. That's great. So no matter what she does, it has nothing to do with you. So that frees you up to be able to love on her, counsel her, disciple her, whatever you need to do. But what it does for us too is that it increases our capacity to love, to forgive. It gives us this ability to be patient, where, you know, maybe if we start getting triggered, we become very, very impatient. Like, you need to get better now. I want to fix you. I want to heal you. I want to make this stop. Stop doing the same thing wrong all the time. Because that's the way maybe we've done that to ourselves, or we were raised that way. So once we work on all of that, then we'll have this compassion that we didn't have before. And then lastly, just the goals. Like, I just want to add, our main goals when we work with these survivors is we want to empower them to be able to find freedom, to be independent, to make their own decisions. A lot of the girls that I've worked with on the street, they don't know what it's like to be able to stand up for themselves or make a decision for themselves or feel what it's like to be in control. They've never really had that. And so as we interact with them, whether it's in a counseling session or on the street, we want to honor them in everything that we do and say. So we want them to feel like they are valued, that they matter, no matter what they've gone through, what they say to you, what they do in the counseling room, you know, no matter what it is, we want them to know, hey, I'm for you. I'm here for you. Just like Kyle and I, we're here for you guys to equip you and help you however we can so that you can go out and do the same stuff that we do. So, thank you.
Thank you, Sam. All right, we all, this is not the big one. Stand up, don't go anywhere. Just stand up and stretch. Maybe in Nigeria, your bottom doesn't get sore because you're like cool or something, but in America, we like to say that the mind can't comprehend any more than the bottom can handle. So we'll have a real break here in a bit, but good time to stretch out. And then I'm reading my entire dissertation to you. Just, if you knew me better, you'd be more afraid about it. All right, whenever you get the blood pressure better, you start feeling your bottom again. It's like, okay, all right, now you can sit down. So I want to quickly go through the chapters. I'm really glad Sam shared with us. I went out, it's all a blur. A week ago Friday, is that when it was? Went out with her and how many teams? About 30 of us were out on the streets in little groups of 5, 4 women, the 2 teams, and then 1 man, just, you know, watching out, being an eagle. And it's just amazing, amazing work. And it's so awesome to see these 2 groups of women. And you have to have, you know, calling to do it, because you're just walking right up to women who would rather not talk to you. They're looking for men, because if they don't, you know, whether they have pimps or they're not, they're in trouble. They're in trouble. If they're not making money, they're talking to Sam. They're like wasting time, and they're not making money if they're talking to Sam. But because this is a ministry that's been going on for 50 years on Long Street, God bless them in Cape Town, that the emphasis is please keep coming back. And Sam and the other women out there, they know these women for like weeks and weeks and years, months, long time. It's about relationship, relationships. So I'm gonna quickly go through the dissertation, and again, don't worry about capturing this. You can have the whole PDF. I'm gonna send it to you. After I'm done, you're not going to want it because it'll be so long. But just on introduction, I have a 40-page bibliography. So if you're going to do any research on this, then please enjoy my bibliography of books and articles and dissertations and UN reports. That's all at the end. But please, if you do any paper, if you're doing a college paper, if you're doing a secondary school paper on trafficking, use the research I found, because it make me feel really good about it, because it's going to help somebody else. So that's why I send this around the world since May. Just want to say this, 45 million conservative estimate there, 45 million trafficking, labor and sex trafficking, slaves currently around the world. That's a 2016 number. And so of course it's much higher than that. These UN groups make these estimates. They're wise to make for conservative estimates, because sometimes these things get too inflammatory and exaggerated. We want to have really good professionalism in all our work, best practices with the people, and the highest level of ethics and non-exaggeration when we work with the statistics. So about 45 million. And so what I was looking at here, the research problem, I was trying to find out, is there any, what is the research out there for effective methods of counseling for sex trafficking survivors? And I won't make you wait 2 chapters, but the big news is there's no research at all that shows any effectiveness for any types of counseling, including mine, my Beatitude Trauma Model. I've not done any empirical research on it. And so, nor did this dissertation, nor was it actually proving that post-traumatic growth can occur. Because I have counseled someone with Beatitude Trauma Model. There's no research on that at all. But I'm proposing this, and I'm saying this is the kind of counseling I've been doing for 33 years now. And in the past 9 years, I've been having a wonderful, wonderful time applying it to female sex trafficking survivors. Definition of terms, research methodology, and there's a famous book, 2009, 27 million people. And even in the course of time, I have to tell you this, even in the course of time that I've been researching this, sex trafficking is getting worse around Nigeria, around America, around South Africa, around the world. When I started seminary 8 years ago, human trafficking, labor and sex trafficking, was the 3rd largest illegal activity behind what? Drugs and arms, illegal arms. And then about 5 years ago, it was the 2nd behind drugs, human trafficking, and arms. And then 2 years ago, it became officially UN, all estimates, by far, the number one, $150 billion a year, very small estimate, $150 billion a year generated on human trafficking, labor and sex trafficking. And then comes drugs, and then comes arms. And the reason why is that illegal crime gangs, America, Russia, Nigeria, South Africa, they've discovered that it's unlike you can sell an AK-47 once and you can resell it, but it kind of has decreasing value. And even a kilo of cocaine, you can sell it once, you cut it down and sell it, and poof, it's gone. If you buy, I say this with love because I've known many, a 12-year-old girl, and you can keep her alive for like 4 years, and then 4 years of her being raped thousands of times, you can make millions of dollars, tens of millions, of naira. And so it's actually the scale is huge. And so they're sadly figuring this out. So that's why it's getting worse. We're all trying to do something about it, but it's getting worse because they're figuring out you can make so much more money on a 12-year-old girl than cocaine, then you can on hashish, than you can on selling AK-47. And so we have to wake up to this. And as I say, in the history, I do want to write a book on the history of sex trafficking through like all of world history. There's always been sex trafficking. I have a section here about the sex trafficking in the Bible. The Bible, Old New Testament, talks about sex trafficking. So let's go through this quickly. Many things. Like I said, it's only a 19-year-old Bales 1999 book, Disposable People. Everybody marks that as a kickoff on the modern era of people saying, we need to do something about this. We need to find out where is it, what's happening, what can we do about it, how does it affect people? 1999. And in this tiny little baby, it's actually called a baby field, no, a baby, wrote the girl, a baby field, only 19 years old on psychological research is very, very young. There's 100 years worth of research on depression, 100 years of research on anxiety. Only 19 years has this been studied. And that's why I encourage you to ask for my PDF and read it if you're interested in this field. And because there's really not very much research on work and doing effective work. But we also have to keep up with the literature because you're professionals. Keep up with the literature and find out what's going on. And there's plenty of things that you don't have to get a PhD to do this. You find a few of these journals, you get a few emails, and you get log on, and you get emails sent to you when research findings come up. Boom, suddenly you're informed. Light reading from Kyle, and then suddenly you get a few of these journals coming into your inbox, and you're set. So I did want to show you this because this might ring a bell. Different approaches. So I just said to get the mind noted that some approaches may not only be ineffective, but they may even be re-traumatizers because they force the survivor to relive the trauma without resolution. So a lot of things that people do, even some psychological first aid approaches they think might be good, that's found to be ineffective with disaster victims, tsunami victims, genocide victims, survivors, and war survivors. Gotta be careful. Gotta be careful. Just because it makes sense to you doesn't mean to be effective for everyone. So here's the summary. Look at the very top of page 49 here, just to share a few of these things with you. This is my best list on the whole thing about some of the things that have been used. So I'm not stating that research shows that these are effective. This is my little summary paragraph on page 49. These are a summary, a list of the types of counseling that have been used to help sex trafficking survivors. Trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical trauma-focused CBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, which is a little bit different, family therapy, peer support groups, supplementary therapies such as music therapy, eye movement desensitization, reprocessing, EMDR, you know what that is, psychopharmacology, medication, and expressive therapy such as art. Thank you. It's okay, it's art. And because like, if you don't know about art therapy, even, that's not just somebody drawing. Even if you look at something, if I was talking to a survivor, and what she saw there in this picture, what she saw there in this picture, that's helping, even just looking at it and talking about what she feels, that's therapeutic. That helps her label emotion. That's what the word express. You drink espresso coffee? Express. And we're means out of, and the press out of. So we want to express, help survivors express their trauma because they do not know how to talk about it. Not only because it's horrible, but because the scale of it is hard to capture in words. Poetry, sand tray, animal-assisted therapies, dogs, cats, horses, equine. And so DeChesney summarized that trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy is the most commonly used treatment. Trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy uses 12 to 20 structured sessions to teach the patient coping skills, trauma narration, trauma processing, treatment consolidation, and closure. So those are not studies of effectiveness, but that's just in one paragraph. That's the literature as of May. I can attest. I did the work for you. You're welcome. And that's all the literature can tell us about what has been tried. But hopefully next year or two, there's going to be some research that shows it's actually effective. But this year, next year, and I'm very excited about this. And because whenever I write a book about this, I'll be able to include this. All right, let's keep on rolling here. Post-traumatic growth in trauma survivors. I won't say much about that, but it's a fascinating field because since 1995, there's been research to show, again, why is it that some people have post-traumatic growth after trauma and most people don't? How does it work? How does resilience fit into it? Some of you know from your group here, Blessing Hutchinson, She's a member. She lives in Johannesburg, South Africa, but she's a member of your group here. She's Nigerian. And so she's studying a lot about resilience. And so resilience is what you have before a trauma that can help prepare you to survive the trauma. Post-traumatic is what can occur for some people after trauma. So to put the two together in a sentence, the higher your resilience pre-trauma, the more likely you are resilience pre-trauma, the more likely you are to have post-traumatic growth after trauma. But they're like complementary fields of study in psychology, psychiatry, social work. Components of post-traumatic growth, I won't read all those to you. I love this stuff though. It's been my life for 8 years now. And there's critiques, it's a PhD dissertation, spiritual aspects of post-traumatic growth. I have to say here, pause and say, without my wife and my mother, who lives with us, she's 86, she lives with us. We have 4 kids, 20 to 31. They're out of the house. My mom lives with us, 31. They're out of the house. My mom lives with us. My mom and my wife are like the best editors on the planet. And I need lots of editing because let's hear from mothers, praise the Lord, mothers and wives, because I'm all over the map. If I could have a sentence that was as long as a page and talk about everything in the whole universe and how it all connects together, I'd be happy. Apparently, that's not good writing. Or so says my wife. She takes every one of my sentences and she chops them into 3. And say, oh, but she's right, I'm wrong. And it's always like a good husband move right there. You're right, I'm wrong. She's been, and our marriage has actually improved. 20 years ago, she stopped editing my stuff because we were having marital difficulties based upon her editing. I didn't like what she edited, and she got her feelings hurt, but I didn't take all her edits. And so that's when we were young, only 10 years, praise the Lord. We matured. Now chapter 5, just quick overview, we're pushing forward to our break. This is the longest chapter, it's 74 pages, and so you may have post-traumatic stress disorder after chapter 5. And don't ask me why it's 74 pages. It's traumatic. Good. And so it was kind of funny doing a PhD dissertation at age 50 in 177 miles away from my home, and in addition to everything else, while continuing trips and counseling and ministry and everything else. It's not really a good idea. It was very traumatic. But yet it's not really traumatic because what's really traumatic? Sex trafficking. That's traumatic. And so all the way through it, I kind of thought, it's like, this is for me like a first world problem. Oh, my life's so hard. I'm doing a PhD. And it's like, no, I was glad to do this for my sisters, treasures, survivor sisters. I can do a little bit of hard work and get a bonus PhD on top of the rest of my life if it's going to help me propel me forward, and I can reach my sisters better, not only in Austin, Texas, but around the world. Now here's all the good news, chapter 5. We'll get through this. And then again, at the end, all the PDFs, more PDFs than you ever, and if you have trauma from my PDFs, I will do Skype counseling with you. I get emails from me from Nigeria. I say, Kyle, I died somewhere through your dissertation. I'm traumatic, I'm traumatized. I have 3 of the 4 diagnoses already. So, yeah, you laugh now, you haven't read it yet. Sam's read it, look how well she's turned out. So, you try. And then again, she's in counseling graduate school. So I have to say this, an overview of relevant passages in the Old Testament, what we Christians call the Old Testament, Law and Prophets. And fascinating stuff. Look up the word whore. I use the word kindly. King James, whore, a harlot, and prostitute. Fascinating stuff. God approves of this. God doesn't approve of this, but it's a reality through all the time. And so even from the Old Testament, just looking at these words, harlot and prostitute, amazing stuff can be seen. Where God's saying to the people of Israel, they come out of Egypt, one of the things he says to them says, do not make your son or your daughter play the harlot. What does that mean? He's telling the former slaves, the Jews, don't sex traffic your own children. You think it means that? Yes, I proved in Hebrew that it means that. It's not spiritual. It's like, were they doing that? Of course they were doing that. Happens around Nigeria, happens around America, happens around the world. 4 of the 20 survivors I'm currently counseling were sex trafficked by their own father. Biological father, one adopted father. It's horrible, but it's common. And it's been under the radar for about 7,000 years now, but not anymore. We're talking about it. Hallelujah. So I go through Old Testament, amazing stuff. I think it's amazing. Why I included, and then an overview of relevant passages in the New Testament. And there's even less references in the New Testament, but there's some very, 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 very important ones. I'll just highlight one. You see there at the bottom, I have Matthew 21, 31, 32. And what I like to point out in that passage, I like to say this as well because I'm a bit of a troublemaker. You might have noticed that. So what I like to say is that about Jesus loving prostitutes. So I like to talk about that. Jesus loved prostitutes. Did Jesus go to prostitutes to pay money and have sex with them? No, he didn't. But he loved prostitutes. He loved prostitutes who were still prostitutes. He loved former prostitutes. He had former prostitutes in his ministry and his disciples. And so this, in Matthew 21, I argue in my dissertation, that's the nice word for it, argue, that I believe that Jesus is saying right here to the Pharisees in the temple, he said to them, the tax gatherers and the prostitutes will enter the kingdom of God and you will not. And that's what got him killed. That when you see, read that Matthew 21, and it says 10 verses after verse 32, it says, and after that time, the Pharisees no longer argued with Jesus, but they only plotted amongst themselves about how they might destroy him. So I love talking about that because I too love prostitutes and sex trafficking survivors and treasures. And so, because Jesus did. And so his love and he got it because the repentant tax gatherers, Jewish men who were in collusion with Romans, who had enough money to have wild parties and bring prostitutes in, when they repented and followed him, and the same thing with prostitutes who repented and followed Jesus, they were some of his best disciples, including who wrote this book? Matthew. He was a repentant Jewish tax gatherer. And so I get the preaching here. It was just a church right here. We really cleared out here, there's a different church going, so that's what I feel after effects of the church. I'm a pastor, well, that's okay. So lots of quotes, so much stuff. I'm going through quickly. A little section I like a lot. Jesus, whatever you believe, not forcing my beliefs on you, but as a Christian, I believe it is important for me to explain how Jesus Christ is the Son of God and Son of Man. Everything that's Son of God, Messiah. It's kind of important. But also, you see him here, Son of Man. How many times did Jesus call himself Son of God in the book of Matthew? 0. He read 2 times when somebody called him that, but he didn't go around. Why? Because he was an undercover spy. Because Jesus was smart. He was undercover. He was a spy in the land. He called himself the Son of Man 27 times in the book of Matthew. And so that was extremely important. 0 times Son of God. He was Son of God, Son of Man. He called himself that. And I argue here in this chapter that his identity as Son of Man was not only as important as identity as Son of God, but also it was extremely important in this healing discipleship ministry. Now I'm getting excited reading stuff. It's probably better I don't have my reading glasses on because I saw all this. I have to tell you all that. And then Jesus Christ Healing and Discipleship Ministry, book of page 92. So what I argue here in this section, I'm very passionate about this as well. I show exegetically from the Greek that what Jesus did in the book of Matthew is what he did was what I called healing-discipleship. I made stuff up. It's a gift of mine. Thank you. I just make stuff up. I don't lie, but God shows me stuff and I put a term for it. So I created this term, healing-discipleship. And what I'm arguing here is that Jesus didn't do healing over here and didn't do discipleship over here. What he did was healing discipleship. And it was like one whole thing. He did that all the time. Everywhere he went, he was healing people, spiritually and physically. And everywhere he went, he was doing discipleship. Everywhere he went, it was a continuous process, not some corny, phony kind of thing. Everywhere he went, it was people. You love people, you love people. And clearly people loved him in an unusual way. So I go through and explain that. We're almost to page 100. You're going to survive. You're going to make it to the break. You're going to get there. And then Jesus' compassion and feeling people's pain. So I have lots of great quotes of what it means to feel someone's pain. Actually have not pity, no, not sympathy, but actual empathy, actual compassion to feel what they feel. I never tell a sex trafficking survivor, I know what you feel, or I feel what you feel. I've never been sexually abused, sexually assaulted. I've never been sex trafficked. So I never claim that. I don't say, oh yes, I understand. What I do say, I tell them what I feel. They tell me something, I tell them what I feel. And it's 1/1000th, 1/10,000th as much as what they feel. But I can honestly say I'm feeling very, very sad about that memory you're having about the time the 10 men raped you at a party. Very, very sad about that. I'm very mad about it as well. I wish I had been there. I would have killed them all. This is what we talk about. We talk about lots of killing in counseling, so sorry, Mr. Miller. Because I feel that as a man that likes to protect boys and girls and women. And so I tell them that because that's what I'm feeling. But the compassion of Jesus, that motivated him to do what he's doing. We're not even at the best part yet. And no, it does not involve Jesus killing anybody. And I don't think I'm supposed to either, unless someone comes at me or I witness it on Long Street. And then here's my favorite section, page 98, Christ's healing discipleship of marginalized girls and women. I won't go through them in detail, but I take 7 stories, the book of Matthew, and I show how Jesus reached girls and women in the book of Matthew in a bunch of different situations. A dead girl, a woman with a 12-year hemorrhage, and all these situations I'll go through and how he did it. I'm not just saying that I believe he did it. I believe these stories are true. But my argument is that let's look and see how he did it. Through relationship, through kindness, through love, not being a Pharisee, not judging, but actually being in a relationship with him. And so many, many pages of this, but I'll get all the way down to my favorite one out of Matthew 15. And that's the story of the Syrophoenician woman whose daughter was demonized. And then, here we go. And then what's amazing is that a lot of the people who study this, the scholars, they miss the point completely. They think, why was Jesus having such a bad day? Did he just really call that Canaanite woman? Did he call her a dog? Was he calling her a dog? Why is Jesus having a bad day? He wasn't doing that at all. When you study the passage and you look and see what the words actually are, it's a counseling session. It's a recording of 4 interchanges between Jesus and this woman. Because Jesus was always going to heal her daughter, deliver her from the demon. But he wanted to not only do that, the daughter wasn't even around. He wanted this woman to become his disciple. And so the traveling rabbi Jesus, he wasn't afraid to talk to a woman. He wanted to talk with her and share love and grace and compassion with her so that she could become a follower of his. And so if she would have said, heal my daughter, poof, he could have healed the daughter and gone on. He wanted her to be a follower. He wanted her to be convinced that he loved her. So lots of research, lots of quotes, best scholars in the world on the book of Matthew. And I like it because in Matthew 15, it's the best passage in the Bible that illustrates what I do in counseling. Because it's a good thing I'm a smart aleck. It's a good thing I've been around the world, been to 40 countries, lived in 5, served in 16. Because you need that, because sex trafficking survivors, those who've been around them, treasures. Sam and I have one friend in common, and one friend in common, a friend that's a trafficking survivor. And so we work through this stuff. They're rough, and they're tough, and they're awesome. I'd rather counsel sex trafficking survivors than anybody else, because they're great work, they're real, and they're genuine, and we get to see amazing stuff. You hear the most horrible stuff, but you get to see God do the most amazing miracles. I would encourage you to consider doing this work with us. And then a little bit on Christian trauma counseling approaches. I cover that, some different models in that survey, some good stuff there. And then the big section is I go through my Beatitude trauma model, and I'll show you a diagram after the break to get us started on that, and get us started on the practical section about how we can actually share grace and truth with someone who's been sex trafficked. And this is a dynamic process. There's a Beatitude trauma model for sex trafficking survivors. About a 20-page section which I explain what I do in this Beatitude trauma model. And there's not as many footnotes. You'll notice there's not many footnotes in Model 5. This is like my thing. And there's no research on that. I'm not claiming there's empirical research this is effective. I'm not. I just been doing it for 34 years. And diagrams, we'll come back to that diagram, page 141 in a bit. And I emphasize here Christ-centered counselor and counselee relationships. I talk a lot in my work about grace, relationships, and process. It's all about grace, just receiving God's grace, and in a context relationship is sharing that grace with the people over the process of time. Being committed in relationship for the long term, help you for the long term. It's not rules, it's not religion, it's not denomination, it's not church, it's not one person walking beside another person over a period of time. And just like survivors, they're awesome, and they can tell a phony, but also if you're not a phony, if you're trying to do something, oh, I need to be on my best behavior so that this, this treasure won't be traumatized by me. If you try to do anything like that, anything but genuine, they can smell it. Smell it, and they'll think you're a phony. So you have to work on your trauma. You would have to be yourself, because you're just not going to fool a sex trafficking survivor. She's lived in hell 4 years. She's been raped thousands of times. She's seen all the horrible stuff you haven't. You're not going to fool her. And so just use God of all comfort, who comforts us in all of our affliction, so that we can comfort others with the same comfort with which we are comforted by God. So it's like my favorite little triangle verse. That's who's passing on the comfort we get from God on people, is passing on to the people.